You're about to listen to the Dr. Dahlia Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Dahlia Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Dahlia.
And we're back on the Dr. Dahlia Show, 1-877-Dr. Dahlia, 1-877-DOCDALI. So there's a lot of concern over, are we going to get the Save America Act or not? And the Save America Act, or the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, is becoming a little bit more, shall we say, relevant, especially as we're watching what's going on in California and how usually that state takes weeks to come up with their final tallies because of mail-in ballots. And as you know, the Save America Act, or the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, is about voter registration, election integrity. So key provisions in this legislation is proof of citizenship, where you have to provide proof that you're a citizen, passport, birth certificate, military ID. It directs state and local election officials also to cross-reference voter registration lists with federal databases to verify citizenship status and identify non-citizens. Remember I told you my friend's son wanted to go in to vote in Texas, and they told him he couldn't because somebody voted with his same name in Colorado. So there has to be the safeguards in place and communication and sharing of data such that not who we voted for, but if somebody is claiming to be you or trying to vote for you. Voter ID. You can't say you're Dr. Dahlia if you're not. You can't say you're John Smith. You have to show voter ID. And then there's going to be some guidelines and safeguards as it pertains to mail-in voting. If you are going to get a mail-in ballot, you have to ask for one, register for one. It's not just going to be blatantly sent across your neighborhood, where in my family, only 2 of us get our mail-in ballots, 2 don't. I don't know where the other 2 ever go. So these are things that I think the majority of Americans want. All right. I understand a lot of the Democrats are saying, no, we don't want this. You want voter safeguards. You want to ensure if you are running safe, ethical elections, you want there to be election integrity. Because if there's any room for cheating, it could go the either way, even if you think that you're on the safe side. So there's been a lot of pressure for Senator John Thune to end the filibuster. Ending the filibuster prevents there being a need of 60 votes. The problem is the Senate doesn't have 60 Republicans. And so things are not moving forward in terms of getting this passed. You would think the Democrats would support it, but everybody's worried about their hide. They voted, for voter ID, and that's going to discriminate against women who don't know how to get IDs, which is, by the way, very insulting. Okay, I think the average woman knows how to get an ID, and the average woman has an ID, so they could buy, so they could rent an apartment and, buy a car and, get a mortgage of a house. It's kind of insulting to think that we women don't know how to do this. But if this Save America Act doesn't go through, then Trump fears, as well as a lot of people fear, that we have a lot of holes in our system. So there's been a lot of pressure on John Thune to end the filibuster and pass it. He doesn't want to do that. And I could see both sides. John Fetterman is not a fan. He apparently has said, according to The Hill, that eliminating the filibuster is wrong. And he actually admits to being wrong in the past. He said it was wrong for Democrats to attempt to eliminate the filibuster during the Biden administration. And he said eradicating this procedure would lead to profound ramifications for the United States. He said, one thing I was absolutely wrong on, he said, I've been really very open talking about how wrong I am, is in my cycle in 22, we were running to eliminate the filibuster. He said, and we were wrong, so wrong. This was on Katie Miller's podcast. He said, and now, thankfully, I think Senator Sinema and Manchin were vindicated by this. Whereas people were pretty upset at Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, for both independents, for voting with the Republicans on that. They were former Democrats, but they voted with the Republican Party to block Democrats to preserve the 60-vote threshold. Now, Fetterman was against her effort at the time. But he says this measure protects the voice of the minority. He said we have the risk of, if we lose the filibuster, then the rights of the minority, whether that will be Democrat or Republican minority, would have effectively little or no voice. Now, I know, it's easy to say now that the Democrats are the minority, but, one question that has been asked is, well, why can't the Republicans, and I'm not asking this, but one question is, well, why can't they vote to eliminate the filibuster, pass what they need to pass, and then immediately vote to get the filibuster back? I don't know if that's happened before. You guys might know more about, history of filibusters, and basically with a filibuster, you could stand there and talk for hours. They've kind of changed it now where you could do a silent filibuster, but I think what the Republicans are worried about is if they do this filibuster, then to vote to get it back. If they don't, and the lack of the filibuster remains, then they could be screwed after the midterms or in the next congressional cycle. On the other end, people are saying, look, the Democrats are going to end the filibuster when they come into power. And if it wasn't for Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin preventing that from happening, that could happen in the future, which means majority rules and there's no checks and balances. So this is tricky, because if we don't have election integrity, that affects future elections. And it's really, really important to get this SAVE Act passed. On the other end, if the filibuster is not there to protect either side, what's to stop the Democrats from going, okay, no filibuster, let's now cancel the SAVE Act? We need checks and balances. And so I'm torn on this. I just don't understand why more Democrats wouldn't want election integrity. This makes sense. This really does. And, you need voter ID. You need ID to become a senator. You need to show proof of your ID to be in Congress. So, you need to get it to buy your champagne to celebrate your winning your election. But it's very suspect when you have one side not wanting to ensure that there's integrity in elections. 1-877-Doc-Dolly. Don't go away.
Hi, everyone. Super Bowl champ Vernon Davis here from Legal Help Center. If you've been injured in an accident and think you deserve compensation, listen up, because we have legal professionals standing by right now to answer your questions for free. You can find out if you have a case and how much it's potentially worth. The call is free, the consultation is free, and you can speak with a live agent right now. So if you or someone you know were injured in an accident of any kind, call now to find out if you have a case and how much you could potentially get.
Thanks, Vernon. You heard it, folks. If you've been injured, call and find out how much you qualify for. Call 800-679-0800. That's 800-679-0800. 800-679-0800. Advertisement sponsored by Legal Help Center. May not be available in all states. Not available in California.
Have you ever thought you'd like to buy and sell houses but didn't know how or where to get the money? My name is Ron LeGrand, and over the past 40 years, I've bought over 3,000 houses without using my money or credit and taught thousands to do the same. Today, even in a virtual environment, we buy nice houses in nice neighborhoods using no banks, realtors, contractors, or other costly entanglements, and build huge cash flow and wealth without the hassle of tenants, all without credit and little or no money. You don't need a license or experience, and I'll show you exactly how it's done. Text FREE to 99799, and I'll send you my free training. I promise you I'll change the way you think about real estate and open the door to a new lifestyle that doesn't involve risk or rehabs and can quickly replace your current income. Text FREE to 99799, and let me show you how to take your life back and build cash flow and wealth from your home. That's FREE to 99799. Again, FREE to 99799.
Welcome back to the Dr. Dahlia Show, 1-877 Dr. Dahlia, 1-877 DOCDALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer, and big thanks to y'all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Dahlia, Facebook, The Dr. Dahlia Show, and on YouTube, click like and subscribe. So in addition to helping the heart, reducing your cholesterol status, helping you lose weight, maybe improving and decreasing your risk of dementia, there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that these GLP-1 weight loss drugs may provide protection against many types of cancer. Now, don't get too excited yet. I know these headlines want everybody to be all excited and buying these medications and then, spending money but we'll talk about this. But these are interesting studies. More than 24 studies presented over the past few days at the American Society of Clinical Oncology meeting in Chicago found that patients taking the drugs showed lower risks of developing cancer and disease progression, better survival, and improved responses to some treatments. This isn't compared to people who were not taking Ozempic, Wegovy, Victoza, Rybelsus. So the studies included analysis of clinical records and real-world databases tracking patients who was taking Novo Nordisk's Wegovy or Ozempic or Eli Lilly's Zepbound and Mounjaro. These are kind of the older, the first of the GLP. Well, not really first because there was Rybelsus. There were others, but they're the not necessarily the newer ones that are going to be coming out that can address our satiety and slow down our food absorption by multiple pathways. But the studies were not necessarily designed to show how or why it might affect cancer treatment. But they do believe that by reducing inflammation, according to Reuters, regulating insulin signaling, and engaging directly with tumor biology, they might be contributing to protective effect in cancer patients. Chronic inflammation, as we know, is huge in the development of, and the progression of cancers. And so for these medications to help decrease that inflammation, that could be pretty powerful. So giving credit where credit's due, Dr. Elizabeth Susan McDonald from the University of Pennsylvania reported that on a study of 110,000 women, showing those who took GLP-1 medications were up to 35% less likely to develop breast cancer than those who did not. Now, the first thing you think about is, obesity. If they're fighting obesity, that could be helping prevent breast cancer. True. The less obese you are, the lower your risk. But they believe in addition to that, it's the anti-inflammatory effects of GLP-1s. So semaglutide, which is in Wegovy and Ozempic, and Rybelsus. Then you got tirzepatide, which is in Mounjaro and Zepbound. You have Eli Lilly's Trulicity or dulaglutide and liraglutide, known as Saxenda and Victoza. These are these medications that have been around actually for a while, even though Zepbound and Wegovy are now the FDA-approved weight loss medications. The active ingredient has been around, the semaglutide, the tirzepatide, for a while. They say some of the strongest signals of benefit came from a study, according to Reuters, where they looked at 12,000 patients, and they showed that GLP-1 use not only lowered breast cancer, but also colorectal, liver, lung, and lowered odds of metastatic disease. Now, that's pretty huge. They said people with those cancers who took the liraglutide, the pramlintide, the dulaglutide, the tirzepatide, the lixisenatide, or the semaglutide were 38% to 50% less likely to see the disease spread than people who took drugs from a different class of diabetes, such as the gliptins. Now, when people ask, how do they know to do the study? Well, again, they're looking at individuals who are already taking these medications for diabetes. Because the weight loss trend has come out in the last couple of years. Even though we knew for decades that these medications could help people lose weight modestly. So we do have data if you look back at people who were taking these medications for diabetes. They said reduced cancer incidence, longer survival, fewer metastases were also seen with GLP-1 use in patients with endometrial cancer, bladder cancer, prostate cancer, as well as those with small intestine cancer and blood cancer. That's huge. Another analysis of patients treated at the U.S. community oncology practices found GLP-1 use was associated significantly better overall with breast, prostate, colorectal cancer, lung cancer, liver, and kidney cancer. A 1/3 reduction in risk of death. Researchers also reported that patients who were receiving immunotherapies for cancer, like Keytruda or Opdivo or Yervoy, seemed to do better if they were on these medications. And the GLP-1 users with type 2 diabetes and stage 3 kidney disease also had lower rates of morbidity and mortality with lung cancer, colorectal cancer, liver cancer. I think there might be an association with a type of thyroid cancer. There is a warning based on rodent studies. Researchers say the recent findings point to a potential benefit class effect across most tumor types, meaning they don't believe it would cause cancer risk. All right, so what does that mean? Does that mean everybody and their mother needs to go on these medications? Well, no. What we do need to, though, understand is we're getting all this amazing data of people on these medications. And what happens if they lose weight or if it decreases their inflammation? What we're not studying is what do we do for the individuals who can't stay on the medication or rebounding. So I had a patient call me saying that they were able to get their GLP-1 for a $25 copay. And now all of a sudden the insurance is charging them $500 for this month's prescription. Now I didn't prescribe the medicine and I'm not in a position to fight the insurance for them. They have to talk to their medical provider. But if you've been able to get the medication temporarily, and we're talking mid-year, she got this medication for $25 copay. February, March, April, May. And now she goes to get her June when they go, sorry, you have to pay $500. The problem I'm seeing is this medication is still so damn expensive that when people go off the medication, it's abrupt. If they can't afford it, they can't afford it. And this isn't really something where you could store and ask for extra or cut in half. Yeah, with the Ozempic, maybe you can microdose a little bit, but with Mounjaro, it just comes one dose. And I do not recommend what they talk about online where you dispense the medicine to another sterile vial no, because if you're injecting something into you, there's no way to verify if it's still sterile and not getting contaminated once you plunge it out of the initial and the original tube or syringe. And so as much as I'm excited to hear all this good news, what are the reverse outcomes? What is happening to somebody's heart, somebody's dementia risk, somebody's cancer risk when they abruptly go off the medication? And that could be concerning. Now, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, if you could get the medication and it's safe and you tolerate it for life, that's great. But I got patients who are now telling me, what do I do? Because in 2 days, I have to come up with $500. And I don't have $500 every month to pay for this medication. Now what happens with the rebound? We've got to figure out a way, if these medications are safe and if they're helpful, for them to still be accessible. But somebody not being able to access the medication could be at higher risk. And what I don't want to see is studies come out going, all right, if you go off, you're screwed. So reconsider going on. Because right now, everybody and their mother is taking these medications. And again, if there are health benefits, I like that. I want you guys to benefit from that. But we have no guarantee that the pharmacy isn't going to run out. There's no guarantee that you will just have to pay a $25 copay. There's no guarantee that you won't have side effects, which means there is a greater than 50% chance, even more, of you needing to go off the medication at some point in a year, and even higher in 2 years or 5 years. But what if Medicare runs out of money and they can't pay for everybody's Ozempic or Wegovy or Victoza? So talk to your medical provider. Make sure you're also doing other things to reduce your cancer risk and get your cancer screenings. Avoid smoking, keep your weight down, exercise, vegetables, balanced diet, hydrating, sleeping well. But, when we see these studies, it is exciting. And I am very, very excited to hear that there's positive news. But, the question you have to your medical provider is, what happens if I have to go off? And one of the main reasons why people go off is because they can't afford it. And they stop losing weight. So they're like, why am I still taking this? 1-877 Doc Dolly.
Looking for a gift that can actually help secure someone's future? It's Mark Falter's new book, Common Sense Income Strategies. It makes the perfect gift for that special someone in your life. Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using time-tested strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. To learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Secure your future with Common Sense Income Strategies by Mark Falter. Again, to learn how to receive your free copy, call 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635.
Welcome back to the Dr. Dolly Show, 1-877 Doc Dolly, 1-877 DOCDALI. So Governor Gavin Newsom had required that if you are a state employee, you do need to come back to work for a minimum of 4 days per week. Now, this mandate is something that we're starting to see many other states, and we know that the federal government has done. And according to the Daily Caller, we're getting pushback on this from the State Workers Union case because they're saying it's bad for the air and that working at the job, on job, working and not remote is violating the California Environmental Quality Act, the CEQA. The CEQA was enacted back in 1970 and it requires agencies to assess environmental impacts of projects. Case claims that returning to office needs to undergo environmental review before implementation. And the State Workers Union case is threatening lawsuits, joining previous union and labor group efforts to halt or modify the mandate. Why? Because they think it hurts the environment. State Employee Union, California attorneys, administrative law judges, and hearing officers in state employment case has now issued letters last week to state agencies claiming that Newsom's return to work order did not use the policy set in place by a 5-decade-old environmental law, even though that law was made when people were going to work. They claim that if you return to work, even though it's been 6 years since the mandate and the lockdown, it would, quote, require hundreds of thousands of additional monthly commutes by state workers, creating hundreds of thousands of new car trips and thousands of tons of additional air pollution from automobile tailpipes. Case's objective here is to ensure that telework decisions are made thoughtfully and transparently rather than through blanket mandates that undermine California's climate goals, according to the Daily Caller. So the California Environmental Quality Act, the law case cited, requires that state and local agencies have to evaluate the significant environmental impacts of proposed projects and take all measures to reduce or eliminate those impacts. Not that anybody did all that when they decided to lock down and make all the COVID changes. If you remember, we were really wrecking with the environment when we went to all plastic, when we stopped recycling, when we did single-use only paper in plastic, when we made people idle in their car for takeout because they weren't allowed to go into a business, and when we were spraying Lysol, which affects the ozone layer, and spraying all these sterilizing products Where was the environmental law then? And this is kind of confusing to me. You would think, well, if there's a law and we need to review this before we do a lockdown, that lockdown happened super lickety split. And now that you're trying to get people back to work 6 years after COVID, like, no, we have to review the environmental implications. So returning to work, does it affect traffic? Yes, it can. Again, traffic's pretty bad in California. And I'm noticing in Vegas, as more people had been working remotely, yep, we had more room on the streets. It's nice. That doesn't mean they're not polluting the air at home. You could still pollute the air. How do we know that people working remotely are not driving their car to the local community pool, to the mall, to hang out with their friends? They're still driving. And let's give them that argument. Let's say we're going to have less cars on the road during the day. And there's more pollution. And I get that. Don't you think that's going to make employers want to go more towards AI? Why is the mandate why is there now? It's not a mandate. It was always, you have a job, you come to work. But with COVID, we temporarily said you could stay at home until we tell you to come back. All of a sudden, we're trying to get them to come back and nobody will. It's easy to lock down. It's really hard to reverse the damage from that. So why would Gavin Newsom, a liberal governor, be mandating that? Because things aren't getting done. They also have a budget crisis. They need to explain where that money's going. And if somebody's not showing up to work, or they claim they're working and they can't tell that work is getting done, you know, a great study would be, look at the downloads from Netflix, Paramount, and Disney, and Hulu, and HBO Max. Look at the downloads and look at the time of day the downloads are happening. Look at the area codes. I'm sure you can even look at the names. Figure out who's watching movies when they're supposed to be working. Makes you wonder. But this is why the AI apocalypse is happening. If employers cannot get people to come to work and they're getting sued for the mere suggestion of coming to work for your paycheck, it's a matter of weeks before that job just doesn't exist anymore. And this is what we're seeing. Employees who complain, it's not the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's, I want someone that doesn't complain. And if I could use AI to do the job, I'm going to do that. I can't tell you how many times I call and I need customer service and there's no customer service. It's just a bot. This issue I'm going through with Twitter, where somehow somebody hacked my account. They thought they were posting spam, so they suspended it. Now, I thought they suspended it temporarily until they got rid of the hacker, and no, it just permanently suspended. I can't get to a person. Why? Because the company found it easier to just have bots deal with it, and we don't have to do customer service. We're popular no matter what. Customer service used to be really, really important. Customer service was vital for any company. And unfortunately, now, here we are, where they don't care. Because customers, the customer loyalty, maybe restaurants need it and some companies that do sales. But for the state, you're loyal to the state if you live there. They don't need customer service. They don't need somebody going, oh, well, that state worker was really, really nice. So if they can't get you to come to work, you're going to be replaced. We keep saying, well, we need employers. We need Trump to stop AI. What we really need is employees to not be so troublesome. Now, mind you, there's some employers out there that are jerks. And I get working from home is really nice. I get that. But I have to come into the studio. I don't do my show from home because coming into the studio does a better quality job. Well, you'll eventually see the quality. It might not be that apparent yet, but trust me, it's better than me doing it at home. And we are going to be losing our jobs to tech the more we don't want to go to work. And I understand people for 6 years have been able to take advantage of watching Netflix, hanging out with the dogs and cats, hanging out with their kids. It's nice. But where's the productivity and who is spending the money? That's why the federal government made the mandate going, look, if our tax dollars are going to this, you're going to be working. And if not, leave. If you don't want to come back to work, quit. I thought that was brilliant. You know, a job is a gift. We don't want to be abused. We need labor laws. We need protection from some employers. But being given a job and you have a paycheck and you could take care of your family with that paycheck, if they want you to show up and work, you show up and work. There's this big demand now for remote work, and I don't think people are going to find it. Because there were some individuals when they did remote work that double dipped or they didn't do their job. And now everybody else is paying for it. 1-877-DOC-DALI, 1-877-DOCDALI.
Hi, everyone. If you've been injured in an accident and think you deserve compensation, listen up. Because we have legal professionals standing by right now to answer your questions for free. We'll help you find out if you have a case and how much it's potentially worth. If you were hurt in a car accident, truck accident, motorcycle accident, rideshare accident, slip and fall, or any other type of accident, call our 24/7 hotline now and let us help you find out how much your case is potentially worth. Call 800-978-6800. That's 800-978-6800. 800-978-6800. I'm Gina Hart, here with spokesman Jack Mercer. So Jack, tell our listeners who should give us a call right now.
Well, Gina, first off, thank you for having me join you here in the studio. It's always great to answer the listeners' questions. Now, as far as who should call in, anyone who's been injured in an accident and think you deserve compensation, give us a call right now. The call is free, the consultation is free, and with our no-fee guarantee, you pay nothing unless we win you money.
That's great advice. Thanks, Jack. And is it true that the Legal Help Center is open 24/7?
That's right, Gina. We're open anytime you need us, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you or someone you know were injured in an accident of any kind, call now and let us help you find out if you have a case and how much it's potentially worth. Call 800-978-6800. That's 800-978-6800. 800-978-6800. Advertisement sponsored by Legal Help Center. Not available in California. May not be available in all states.
And we're back on the Dr. Dahlia Show, 1-877-DOC-DALI, 1-877-DOCDALI. So we haven't heard much from the teenage murder that happened on a Carnival cruise ship last November. If you remember, there was a girl whose family was vacationing, and it was a blended family where I believe her father had a new wife, and the wife's son, now her stepbrother, she was sharing a room with, and he became the prime suspect in her murder. And federal investigators are still working on the case. And one thing that has come up is that in addition to the stepbrother, Timothy Hudson, who's 16, 2 years younger than her, being accused of raping and murdering his stepsister, This was on this Carnival cruise ship that was going through Cozumel, Mexico, back to Miami. There was apparently a second juvenile that they are investigating to see if they were maybe involved, because reportedly she allegedly had sex with this second juvenile on the trip. And so it hasn't been as cut and dry regarding the suspect. According to Daily Mail, prosecutors said that the suspect, her stepbrother, was the only person in the room with the cheerleader when she was strangled to death. And then her body was hidden under a bed in the cabin. Now, she was sharing this room with her stepbrother and her 14-year-old half-brother. But according to an unsealed 145-page detention hearing transcript reviewed by Fox News, prosecutors disclosed that the victim had sex during the cruise with a different juvenile. He's been referred to as minor witness 2. So the prosecutors included the disclosure as they laid out DNA evidence collected from her body, including the rape kit, vaginal swabs, etc. And there was male DNA, one of which tested positive for sperm. The findings followed the FBI to obtain a search warrant for Hudson's DNA, as well as the second minor who allegedly had sex with Kepner. And after the DNA samples were compared to the swabs, it was determined that it was most likely, again, the alleged suspect's DNA. And so the FBI lab results found that he was, if you look at statistics, 120 sextillion times more likely to have produced the DNA on the swab that was positive for sperm, and 1.2 septillion times more likely to have produced the male DNA on the other swab as well. So I don't know too much details of the other second minor and who this might have been and when she and this minor might have been together, but the evidence strongly suggests that the suspect is the one that possibly attacked her, raped her before she died. And this is just horrifying to think that a family is on a vacation, and here you have a girl who is, being told by her, dad and now stepmom that she has to share a room with her two brothers, one a half-brother, one a stepbrother, and one of whom allegedly could be her murderer. Surveillance footage from the cruise ship shows her entering the cabin at 7:38 p.m., never reemerging. And Hudson had apparently spent a key stretch of time, the suspect, in the same room. Now, prosecutors are relying on multiple pieces of evidence, including the DNA, rape kit, footage, phone location data. And they said that Kepner's phone, the victim's, traveled along the same route as Hudson later that night before the device was found destroyed in a trash bin. The judge said the evidence certainly amounted to probable cause, but he would not characterize the prosecution's case as strong. Multiple defenses could be made. And I mean, this is, I'm confused by a lot of things with this. If they have the video of her going into the room, they have the video of nobody else coming into the room, and he being in the room, and then she being found. Now, I mean, I understand the defense could say, well, whoever found her could have done it. But they could, with forensics, we could tell how long a person has passed. And we can, again, there's DNA. But unfortunately, I'm concerned about, and we've talked about this, where you have many families who blend. And a lot of these kids don't like who they have to blend with. Do they not like the new stepdad or the stepmom or the stepbrother or the stepsister? Now, me growing up, my sister was my half-sister, but my brothers were my full brothers, and it didn't matter. Just, you're sharing a room, sharing a mattress. You guys, that's just what you do. And I my family was poor. In fact, my father, he as kids, they shared the same room as his parents, sometimes the same bed. I mean, you only have one room to live in. But with something like this, I'm dying to hear if there were conversations she had with her father saying, I don't like him, I don't trust him. In fact, there were reports that a previous boyfriend of hers said that he found the suspect on top of her in a previous episode. And if a child feels like they are at risk by somebody, a part of their blended family, where is their recourse? Where do they go? Now, school counselors, if you talk to a school counselor, they could get authorities involved. If you talk to your medical provider, you could get authorities involved. It doesn't sound like she had a very close relationship with her mother. Apparently, the mom only found out that she had passed from the news. And I think there was some early reports of possible restraining orders between the mom and the family. But for those of you that have a blended family, or even a not blended family, and you have children who are not feeling safe with other children, you need to investigate that. You need to look at it. You need to give it some attention. And if this girl had multiple reasons to not want to be next to this stepbrother, let alone share a room. And I got to tell you, these cabin rooms are very isolated. They're very small. You can't really hear anything from another room. And sadly, she was murdered. I'm not saying by whom. You're innocent until proven guilty. But without anybody knowing. And I think she wasn't found until the next day. And she's a young girl who had to share a room with an individual who I don't think she wanted to share a room with, especially with issues of him getting on top of her before. And parents need to not be naive about how there could be mental illness in the family. They have to understand that there's some very, very dangerous individuals that they can start their evil even as a younger child or as a teen. I hope they can, I hope this can find some closure. I really feel bad for the parents, for the half-brother, and for the other family members, and to see something like this happen. But we as doctors are always on alert for, is somebody being abused in a family, whether it's their biological parent or a step-parent or a step-sibling. We're always there to screen that. But we don't see patients anymore to the degree that we used to. Some parents don't even take their kids into doctors anymore. They just use telemedicine. And so kids need to be able to talk about it. And if they feel like a parent's going to get all defensive, they're not going to bring it up to a parent until, unfortunately, it's too late. And now we have a dead girl. Again, we still can't say who we know this, there is a suspect and the trial hasn't started yet. But if it ends up being a stepbrother who she didn't want to be around, we really need to relook at, how we're doing our families and offer ways for our children. I understand, trust me, I was the first one to say, I don't want to be around my brothers and sisters. But we need to identify before another tragedy like this happens. 1-877-LA.
Looking for an easy read that can actually help secure someone's future? Pick up a copy of Mark Falter's book, Common Sense Income Strategies. For the past 30-plus years, Mark has helped thousands of hardworking Americans secure their financial future by using strategies that continue to create wealth, whether the market is up or down. Strategies that will make perfect sense once you take the time to read this powerful book. Common Sense Income Strategies brings to you what Mark has been teaching in person and talking about on the radio for decades. It's not rocket science, it's a pretty easy read. You've worked too long and too hard not to see the fruits of your labor. Common Sense Income Strategies is available now on Amazon or by calling 866-764-2635. That's 866-764-2635. Common Sense Income Strategies by Financial Fitness Show host Mark Falter. Secure your financial future today.